All right, guys, it is closing day. That means a lot of hard work and a lot of fun, but we're going to talk today about the differences between the closing day timeline for a buyer and a seller because they are different. I'm Tiffany Weber, and I am a real estate closing attorney in Mooresville, North Carolina. I have done thousands of real estate closings at this point, and even though I know the timeline for a closing like the back of my hand, most people don't because it's not something that you do every day. So today we are going to start, I'm breaking the rules a little bit, with the day before the closing, because if you're not prepared the day before, the day of is going to be a mess. So we'll start on the seller side of things because usually they've done all of their hard work already with packing up and moving. So their timeline's a little bit shorter than the buyers. So the day before the closing, if you are a seller, you should have your belongings packed up and moved out as best you can. I know there's always a little bit of stuff left over, but it's going to be very difficult if you are just starting to move everything out the day of closing. You should also confirm that any agreed upon repairs have been completed the day before closing, and also make sure that the house is going to be in as good as or better condition as it was when the buyer saw the property when they put in an offer. That's actually in the North Carolina contract, that the property has to be in as good as condition or better. Now, sellers, on the day of closing, you're going to need to go through the property again, make sure that you haven't left any of your belongings, that you haven't made any sort of damage to the property as part of moving. If you have, you're going to want to get that fixed before closing, preferably before the buyers walk through the property that we'll go over during their closing timeline, just to prevent any issues on the day of closing. Another thing that will come up on the day of closing is that sometimes your movers, or maybe you, will accidentally move something out that you agreed to leave. So make sure that you talk to your realtor and also look in your contract to make sure that you didn't accidentally take some property that you agreed to leave at the house. Once you've done that, it's probably going to be time to go to your closing appointment. And when you go to that appointment, you're going to need to take a valid photo ID. If you don't know what valid photo ID means or what types of identification will suffice, call the closing attorney before you get to the office, because that way we can make sure that you have what you need so that all of the documents can be notarized properly. And also, please make sure that anyone that needs to sign the documents actually shows up. You would not believe how many times we will have one spouse show up to a closing and say, "Oh, I didn't know that my spouse had to come," even though they both own the property. They think just one of them can sign. So everyone that owns the property has to sign. And even if, in North Carolina, even if you bought property without being married, if you later become married, then your spouse has to sign the deed at closing. That's absent some free trader or prenuptial or postnuptial agreement, but the general rule is your spouse has to sign the deed at closing. So bring them to closing. So once you get to the attorney's office for the closing appointment, everything is pretty simple from here on out. You're going to sign the closing documents like the deed and the lien waiver and a few other things, and you're going to sign them exactly the way your name is typed on the documents. And also bring instructions for how you want to receive your closing proceeds or how you want to get paid for the house. Usually you would get a wire, and if you want a wire, you're going to bring your account and routing number to the closing attorney. Otherwise, you can often be mailed a check or you can pick up a check. No, you cannot get a suitcase of cash. I'm so sorry. It's not one of the options. After you leave the closing appointment, you're going to wait for notice that the deed has been recorded. In North Carolina, a seller cannot receive their proceeds in any way, shape, or form until the deed is recorded. So once you get that notice, you're going to do a little happy dance and then wait to get your wire or go pick up your check at the closing attorney's office. And then you're done. You sold your house. Hey, if you're learning anything from this video, go down and hit the subscribe button so we can bring you more stuff just like this. All right, back to it. All right, if you are buying a house, let's talk about what you need to do the day before closing to make sure that your closing day goes smoothly. And this is the most important thing I can tell you, and it is to wire your closing funds at least the day before closing, earlier if you can. And I know sometimes your figures aren't final. That's okay. Get as close as you can. Talk to your lender about whether they think you should send a little bit more because closing figures might increase, but just get close. And then when you get to the closing appointment, have your checkbook so that you can make up any small differences, or anything that you overpay will be returned to you. So don't worry, if you bring too much, you're going to get it back. If you're a little bit short, just bring a check to make up the difference. But if you wire your closing funds the day before, that is going to make sure that you don't have any delays in recording. Your deed can't record until all the funds are in. So do it the day before. If you do it the day of, it's going to be really hectic and it might delay your closing. Another thing is, please don't show up with a power of attorney that your attorney or lender has never heard about, because it is going to delay your closing. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about that. If you show up with a power of attorney that your lender has not approved already, your closing is going to be delayed. It could be hours, it could be the next day. We don't know, but it will be delayed because all of the docs have to be redrafted, and your underwriter at the lender is going to have to approve the document that you show up with. All right, now it's closing day. If you're a buyer, what are you going to do? Well, the first thing is you're going to walk through the property with your realtor if you haven't done so already. And you're doing this to make sure that there aren't any new damages that you'd never seen before that were caused by the seller during move out. You're going to make sure any repairs that were agreed were completed. You're going to make sure that the property is in at least as good as condition as it was when you first saw it. Another thing you'll check on when you're doing your walkthrough is that any personal property that you agreed to purchase during this process, or that you agreed in the contract would remain in the home, is still there. The next thing is, if you didn't listen to me before and wire funds early, you're going to wire your funds, and you're going to hope that they arrive in such a time that it's not going to delay recording of your closing documents. If you're a buyer who has a lender that will allow you to e-sign any documents, you may have woken up to an email with a whole lot of documents for you to sign. And you should do that before you arrive to the closing appointment or while you're sitting with the attorney at the closing table. I do not recommend that you wait until after the appointment, because those e-signed documents have to be signed on the day of closing, or else your lender is going to make you redo the whole closing package. So it's better to do it before or at the closing appointment so you have no chance of forgetting to do it. Now, just like the sellers, the buyers have to bring a valid photo ID to the closing. And if you don't know what will be acceptable, again, ask your lender or ask the closing attorney beforehand, so that by the time you arrive to the closing, you've got what you need so that the documents can be validly notarized. Another thing that's very important and very similar to what sellers have to do is to make sure that everyone who has to sign the closing documents shows up to the closing. For example, if your spouse has to sign whether they are on the note or not, they'll probably still have to sign the deed of trust if they are on the deed. So make sure that your spouse comes to closing. Now, once you've gotten to the closing appointment, it's really similar to the seller side of things. It's kind of all downhill from here. You're going to sign the closing documents with the attorney, and the attorney is going to explain them to you while you sign, so that by the time you leave the appointment, you understand everything that just has happened and how these legal documents affect your rights. After that, you're just going to sit tight and wait for notice that your deed has been recorded. And once it has, you can go get your keys. You are a homeowner. If you're still here, then you know by now that the timeline for buyers and sellers on closing day and the day before are a little bit different. But if you didn't hear anything else, then please make sure, if you are a buyer, that you wire your funds to the closing ahead of time. And that's because you cannot get into your new property until the deed records. And we can't record the deed until your money is in the trust account. So make sure you do that ahead of time. That's going to minimize any of the big problems that could arise on closing day. If you are someone that's interested in real estate law, how the closing process works, anything that goes along with that, we love putting out videos just like this one. You're going to see them all on our channel. You should go subscribe so that you can learn more. I'm Tiffany Weber, real estate closing attorney in Mooresville, North Carolina at Thomas & Weber, and I will see you in the next video.